Good morning, future teachers. Good morning, Sir Douglas Ferrer. I'm Rodney Tapang, and now I'm your discussant for this day. And I will be going to discuss about the changes in medieval society. So today we're going to be continuing to look at the Middle Ages, and we're gonna focus on the social spectrum, no? And because something is going to be happen in the Middle Ages that changes Europe forever and still impacts the world today. So let's look at some of these changes, no, in medieval society. Now there are two questions that we were going to be answering on this lesson. Ayan, so the first question will be, why do people trade and how does trade influence people's lives? So on this lesson, makakakita tayo ng maraming pangangalakal na nangyayari sa bagong entity na tinatawag na nating isang town. And the second question will be, what factors cause Europe to progress and evolve socially and economically? So, on this lesson, makikita rin natin kung bakit nilikha, bakit matagumpay, at paano ito nagbabago o nagbabago yung isang town sa mga kaharian ng Europe in the Middle Ages. So, lahat ng ito is masasagot natin in this on this lesson na ano natin. And before we proceed, we will going to know the setting the stage of this lesson. So, habang ang simbahan is nire-reforma at binubuo yung mga katedral at nagaganap yung mga krusada at ang iba pang mga mahalagang pagbabago is nagaganap sa medieval society sa pagitan ng 1000 hanggang 1300. So yung agriculture at yung mga kalakal, yung mga pananalapi is naging makabuluhan on this age. Yung mga town at yung mga cities din is nagdevelop. And this was in part due to the growing populations and to the territorial expansion of the Western Europe and cultural interaction with the Muslim and the Byzantine worlds sparked the growth of a learning and the birth of an institution new to Europe, the university. No? And now, what ends up happening in Europe is a lot more food is gonna be able to be grown during the Middle Ages, no? And there's gonna be three reasons why more food is going to be able to be grown. And as we know, when you have a larger food supply, you have a larger population, which is a marker of advancement. No? Ayan, so we will proceed to the a growing food supply. So, ayan. So Europe's a great revival would have been impossible without better ways of farming expanding civilization that required an increased food supply. So the first reason, no, the first thing is yung klima sa Europe is magbabago at ito ay magiging mas mainit na nagbibigay daan sa mga pananim o sa mga crops na lumago ng higit at para sa isang mas mahabang panahon. So yun yung naging reason dito, and a warmer climate which lasted from about 800 to 1200 that brought improved farm production. And sinimulan nga ng mga magsasaka na ma-develop o malinang ang mga lupain sa mga region na minsan is masyadong malamig upang alam nyo yun, na mapalago pa yung mga kanilang pananim. And bumuo din sila ng mga bagong pamamaraan to take advantage of more available land. So yan. So the second reason is meron tayong tinatawag na switch to horse power. Ayan. So also in the year 900, no, ang mga magsasaka is nakabuo ng isang harness para sa isang para sa mga kabayo upang panghila at gagamiting pang-araro. And now we have already talked about the plow, how it tills, no, the earth, makes it easier to grow food. But what gets developed is a harness for a horse to pull it, which makes it faster plowing and more efficient. No? And sabi dito, ayan, so as for hundreds of years, a peasant had depended on oxen to pull the plows, and oxen lived on the poorest straw and stubble. So they were easy to keep. Horses needed better food, but a team of horses could plow the 3 times as much land in a day as a team of oxen. Yan. So, sinasabi din dito na as a result, no, unti-unting pinalitan ng mga kabayo yung mga baka. So, mas naging matunog yung mga kabayo on this age, no, sa pag-aararo at para sa panghila ng mga the wagons. Consequently, sa buong Europe, the access shrunk as the great forests were cleared for a new fields. So, yan. So, yan yung sa switch to horsepower. So, the third reasons is meron tayong tinatawag na the three-field system. So also something is created called a three-field system where instead of growing crops only, no, half of their fields farmers are going to grow crops on two-thirds of their field. And so we can see this picture here. Makita natin dito na where one side they may grow a wheat, and another side they may grow a bar, which for some of the staple crops in Europe at this time, and they would leave one. So meron silang isang lupain that it's called the fallow, where animals would graze the land, where just be wild grasses, but this would also give an opportunity for the land para ma-replenish, no, yung mga nutrients para mag-grow pa yung mga crops, and when you have animals on it, they're going to fertilize, di ba? And ma-fertilize na yung land with their livings, if you know what I mean now, no? And so the villagers had more to eat, well-fed of the warming climate people. So especially children could better resist disease and live longer. And as a result, the European population grew dramatically. Yan, sinasabi dito sa threefold system, no? So proceed tayo dito sa tinatawag nating the guilds. Ayan, no? And the guilds, ano nga ba sinasabi sa guilds? Pag sinabi natin guilds, ayan, so a change in the European economy was the development of the guild. So pag sinabi natin guild, it is an organization of individuals in the same business or occupation na working to improve the economic and social condition of its members. So kapag sinabi nating a guild systems, maraming mga naninirahan kasi sa bayan na sumasali sa guild. So yung guild is samahan ng mga taong nagtatrabaho sa magkatulad na hanap buhay. And what ends up happening in towns again, yung mga bayan ay isang maliit na unit, di ba, na maraming mga negosyo. Di ba? Alam naman natin in the towns there are business, no? And it's really going to eclipse something called the manor system, where towns can become a self-sufficient organism all by itself that isn't controlled by a noble lord. Now in these towns, you're gonna have something called the guilds, no? Which are a group of people who have the same business. They could be mga carpenters, they could be masons. And we're going to pool the resources, yung kanilang mga knowledge together, no, to improve the economic conditions of its member. To make sure na that if you're Mason, everyone's going to work together to make sure that we all make money, that we are all successful now, no? And the first guilds na tinatawag nating merchant guilds. So, pag sinabi nating merchant guilds, ayan, so sinabi nating merchant guilds, it is the merchants banded together to control the number of goods being traded and to keep prices up. So nagpatayo ang mga mangangalakal na mga bulwagan na parang bulwagan pinagdarausan ng pulong o ng kanilang meeting tungkol sa mga detalye ng kanilang mga negosyo. So kontrolado ng guild yung mga mangangalakal. So ang lahat ng kalakal sa kontrolado ng guild ng mga mangangalakal ang lahat ng kalakalan sa bayan. So maaari din nilang hadlangan yung mga dayong mangangalakal sa pagninegosyo sa kanilang bayan. So ganun sila secured. About the same time, skilled artisans such as yung mga wheelwrights, yung mga glassmakers, yung mga winemakers, yung mga tailors and druggists is began craft guilds. In most crafts, no, yung mga mag-asawa is nag-work sila at the family trade. So parehas silang nagtatrabaho. In a few crops, especially yung mga cloth making, and sa mga babae yon na naka-majority, no. Ang mga guild is nagtakda ng mga pamantayan para sa kalidad ng kanilang trabaho at sahod. At kanilang condition sa pagtatrabaho. So halimbawa, ang mga paninderya is kailangan magbenta ng mga tinapay na may karaniwang sukat sa timbang. So dapat sundin mo yon. At naman yung guild is lumikha din ng mga plano para sa pinangangasiwa ang pagsasanay ng mga bagong magagawa. So ganun sila ka kalupit kung titingnan natin when it comes to their businesses, no? Ayan, so by the 1,000 artisans and craft people were manufacturing goods by hand for a local and long-distance trade. So yung mga guild is naging makapangyarihang pwersa daw, naging pwersa ng economy ng medieval. At ang yaman ng kanilang isinigawa at saka yung mga naipon nila is nakatulong sa kanila na maitaguyod, no, yung impluwensya sa gobyerno at ekonomiya ng mga bayan at lungsod. And so yun. So let's proceed to the craft guilds. So meron tayo dito sa history and depth. Ayan, so kasi pag sinabi natin craft guilds, ito yung important part ng town during medieval period na kung saan yung mga young people is tinitrain nila in a skill job. At ayun, so ganun sila nang lumaki. Ang mga bayan kasi ng mga artisan ay nagtatag sila ng sarili nilang guild. So yung bawat craft o kasanayan ay may sariling guild. So halimbawa, yung mga karpintero, mga barber, may mga panendero, sastre at iba pang mga hanap buhay ay may sariling guild na tinatawag. So ang sino mang hindi kasapi sa isang guild ay hindi maaring gumawa ng products na ginagawa ng nasabing guild na yon. So ganun sila ka-organize, no? Now there are 3 levels. Let's proceed muna tayo dito sa sa graph, no, in a guild services. So sa members, meron tayong set working conditions, covered members with a type of health insurance, provided funeral expenses, and provided dowries for poor girls. So to the community naman, it built houses for victims of misfortune, guaranteed quality work, took turns polishing the streets, and donated windows to the church. So yun. So, ayan. So now there are 3 levels in a guild if you want to say, sabihin na lang natin na ikaw ay a glassmaker, no? So, basically, you would start off as an apprentice. Ayan. And for 2 to 7 years, your parents would pay for you para manirahan sa master shops and you would do basically everything he said. So, lahat ng mga sasabihin ng ng master is kailangan mong sundin. So, eventually, what would happen is, you would be promoted, syempre. You would be promoted to a journeyman. So in this, someone we had worked 6 days a week for the master. And to become a master, this journeyman would need to create something that called a masterpiece, a pinnacle of his skills and knowledge to show the master that he himself could become a master. At kapag sinabi nating a master, we're the one who own shops, and these were the people who worked in the guild na para protektahan nila yung kanilang trades. That's why guilds people, link deals, were called the guild masters, no? And ayan, so let's proceed to and now what's going to also happen during this time is something called the commercial revolution, where a trade business expands dramatically in Europe, and the guilds are an example of this commercial revolution, no? Now, the main facet of that, the main outcome of this commercial revolution is towns. When trade expands, when businesses expand, there needs to be central locations where businesses and trade can be done. So towns are created, and these towns would not be under the control of a lord or a king, but would be created by people coming together. So yan. So, ano sinasabi dito? Ayan, so sabi dito, just as agriculture was expanding and craftsmanship changing, so where trade and finance increased availability of trade goods and new ways of doing business changed life in Europe. So taken together, this expansion of trade and businesses is called, na tinatawag na nating commercial revolution. So in this commercial revolution, meron tayong tinatawag na fairs and raids. So basically, yung train trading na yan, na outpost, no, where people from manors from the lords had a peasant would go to these towns and trade for goods, no? And they would trade for clothing, and they would trade for luxury, yung luxury goods like wine, yung mga dyes, at marami pang iba, and they would trade for foods and necessary items like the salt. But this is the first time that we see goods, no, of being created outside of a manor system. A manor where just this little self-sufficient entity where everything that people needed to survive and would be done on the in the manor clothing. But here we have something else, that we have towns, because these towns are actually going to be interconnected, the trade routes, no? And sinasabi din dito that most trade took place in towns. The peasant from nearby manors traveled to town on fair days. So hauling items to trade, a great fairs were held several times a year, usually during religious festivals when many people would be in town. So people visited the stalls set up by the merchant from all parts of Europe. So dito, ang tela kasi is yun yung ano nila, parang pinakakaraniwang item sa kalakalan. So kasama sa iba pang mga item na to is yung mga bacon, yung mga asin, yung mga honey, and keso, alak, katad, tina, at saka yung kutsilyo, and also the mga lubid. So yung ang mga nasabing mga local na merkado ay natutugunan ang lahat ng mga pangangailangan ng pang-araw-araw na buhay para sa isang maliit na komunidad. So no longer was everything produced on a self-sufficient manner. So yung mga ruta ng mga kalakal ay kumalat. Kumalat to sa buong Europe mula sa Flanders hanggang sa Italy. So yung mga barkong mga kalakal ng Italy is naglakbay sa Mediterranean patungo sa mga pantalan ng Byzantium, tulad ng Constantinople. So naglakbay din sila sa mga pantalan ng Muslim sa baybayin ng Hilagang Africa. So nakarating din sila doon. Yung mga ruta ng kalakal ay binuksan din sa Asia na bahagi ng mga krusada, at ang pagtaas ng negosyo sa mga merkado and fairs made merchants, no, willing to take chances on buying merchandise that they could sell at a profit. No, inimbento muli ng mga negosyante yung kanilang kita na mas maraming kalakal. Kung makikita nyo sa picture na to, no, ito yung this fish market expanded the variety of food available in a medieval. So makikita nyo dyan, no. In a commercial revolution, meron din tayong tinatawag na business and banking. Sa business and banking naman, as trades moved from fair to fair, they needed large amounts of cash or credit and ways to exchange the many types of currencies. No? Enterprising merchants found ways to solve these problems. For example, yung bills of exchange established exchange rates between the different coinage systems. So meron tayong tinatawag na a letter of credits. A letters of credit, ito yung issued by a bank allowing the bearer to withdraw a specific amount of money from the bank or its branches. So naghanap yung mga negosyante ng mga bagong merkado at mga pagkakataon upang kumita. Kailangan bumili kasi yung mga negosyante ng mga kalakal mula sa malalayong lugar. So upang magawa ito, kailangan nilang mangutang ng pera, ngunit pinagbabawalan ng simbahan ang mga Kristiyano na mangutang ng may interes. So isang kasalanan ng tinatawag na usury. So tinatawag nila dito. So paglipas ng panahon, pinahinga ng simbahan ang panuntunan nito sa usury, at pumasok na nga ang mga Kristiyano in banking business, no? Ang banking ay naging isang mahalagang business sa Italy on this age. Ayan, so meron tayong ayan. So kung makikita nyo dito, no, in my screen, ayan, so kapag yung trade increased from the commercial revolution, ayan, so increased trade in the commercial revolution, three things are gonna happen. One, there's going to be more money. Ayan, so there's going to be more money in kingdoms because of the increased trade. And two, because there's more trade, more jobs are going to be needed from guilds, and you're gonna have a lot more wealth in Europe. through all these merchants, no, you get wealthy from trade because more workers are needed. These peasants moved to a town and are paid for their labor because there's more money floating around in Europe. So because of because of increased trade, new business are able to created within these towns, and because there are more wealthy merchants, so they are taxed and increase a king's power, and wealth commercial revolution is incredibly important to the advancement, no, of Europe. So ganun siya. And ayan, proceed tayo dito sa society changes. Ano ang sinasabi dito? In the society changes, the changes brought about by the commercial revolution were slow yet, and they had a major effect on the lives of Europeans. Increased trade brought many changes to the aspect of a society. So dalawa sa mga importanteng pagbabago involved what people did to earn a living and where they lived. As towns attracted workers, the towns grew into cities, and life in the cities was different from life in the sleepy village or on the manors. Ayan. So, meron po tayo dito sa urban life of flourishing, no? Or the flourishes. In urban life flourishes. Ayan. So, sinasabi dito, kung makikita nyo, ang isang typical na bayan sa medieval Europe is sa medieval na Europe ay may halos 1,500 hanggang 2,500 katao lamang. So kahit na ang mga maliliit na komunidad na ito is naging isang malakas na persa para sa pagbabago ng Europe. Dahil ang kalakal at ang mga lungsod is nag-grow together. Ayan, so sabi dito na Europe's largest city, Paris, probably had no more than 60,000 people by that year 1,200. And ayan, so the excitement of and the bustle of towns drew many people. Ngunit may mga ilan na ngunit may mga ilang mga kakulangan sa pamumuhay sa isang medieval na bayan. So makikita ano ba yung mga ito, isa na rito is yung kalye nila is makikitid, punong-puno ng mga hayop, tas ng mga basura nila, wala silang sewer. So itinatapon ng mga tao yung basura nila sa kahit saan. So sa kalye at sa harap ng kanilang bahay. So karamihan sa mga tao is dito is kailanman hindi naliligo. So at ang kanilang mga bahay is kulang sa sariwang hangin at ilaw at malinis na tubig. So dahil ang mga bahay ay gawa sa mga kahoy, no, ang lahat ng ito is prone sila sa sunog kasi gawa sa kahoy nga yung bahay nila. So gayon pa man, maraming tao ang pinili na lumipat sa mga bayan para ituloy ang pang-ekonomiyang at panlipunang mga oportunidad na that day offered. Sabi dito, people were no longer content with their old feudal existence on manors or in tiny villages. Even though legally bound to their lords' manors, many serfs ran away. So according to the custom, ang isang serf is maaari na ngayong maging malaya sa pamamagitan ng pamumuhay sa isang bayan sa loob ng isang taon at isang araw. So meron silang kasabihan na town air makes you free. So many of these runaway serfs, now free people, made better lives for themselves in towns, no? And ayan. So in urban life flourishes, meron din tayong tinatawag na merchant class shifts the social order. So ayan, so habang lumalawak, no, yung kalakalan, the burghers yung mga merchant class town dwellers ay nagalit sa pakikialam na ito sa kanilang kalakal at commerce. And they organized themselves and demanded privileges kasama sa mga karapatang ito yung kalayaan mula sa ilang mga uri ng tolls at mga karapatang pamahalaan ng bayan. So sa mga oras na nakikipaglaban sila sa laban ng kanilang mga landlords at nakuha ang mga karapatang ito sa pamamagitan ng isang pwersa. No? And pag sinabi nating Burgess as a trade expand, ayan, ano ko na yan. Ayan. Busid tayo dito sa the revival of learning. Ayan. So during the Crusades, Syrian contact with the Muslims and Byzantines greatly expanded. So this contact new interest in learning, especially in the works of Greek philosophers. So yung mga Muslim and Byzantine libraries, meron silang mga copies of these writings. Most had disappeared during the centuries following the fall of Rome and the invasions of Western Europe. So dito naman tayo sa Muslim connection naman, in the 1100s, the Christian scholars from Europe began visiting Muslim libraries in Spain. So yung few Western scholars knew Greek, but most did know Latin. So Jewish scholars living in Spain translated the Arabic versions of works by Aristotle and other Greek writers into Latin. All at once, nakakuha ang mga Europeo ng isang bagaman, kasama na nga rito yung mga agham, yung mga filosofiya, yung mga batas, yung mga mathematics at iba pang mga larangan. So bilang karagdagan, dinala ng mga Crusaders sa Europe ang superior ng teknolohiya ng Muslim sa mga barko, navigation at ng mga weapons. So proceed tayo dito sa scholars. Ayan. Scholars and the university. So sinasabi dito, at the center of the growth of learning stood a new European institution, the university. So yung tinatawag nila dito. In the word university, originally referred to a group of scholars meeting wherever they could. No? People, not the buildings made up the medieval university. So yung mga universidad is lumitaw sa Paris at sa Bologna, Italy. Sa pagtatapos ng 1100s, ang iba naman is sumunod sa English town of Oxford at sa Salerno, Italy. So karamihan sa mga mag-aaral ay anak ng mga burgher, mahusay na manggagawa. For most students, no, yung the goal was a job in government or the church. Ang paggamit ng isang bachelor's degree sa theology is maaring tumagal ng 5 hanggang 7 taon sa paaralan. So ang pagiging master ng teolohiya ay tumatagal ng hindi bababa sa 12 taon na aral. Pero the new ideas and forms of expression began to flow out of the university. So at a time when serious scholars and writers were writing in Latin, a few remarkable poets began using a lively vernacular or the everyday language of their homeland. So some of these writers wrote masterpieces that are still read today. So kung alam niyo yung Dante Alighieri na isinulat ni Dante Alighieri yung Divine Comedy at in Italian, at si Geoffrey Chaucer na isinulat yung the Canterbury Tales in English, and si Christine de Pizan isinulat niya yung The Book of the City of Ladies in French naman. So since most people couldn't read or understand Latin, these works is written in the vernacular, brought literature to many people. So madali na lang silang maintindihan. So proceed tayo kay Aquinas and the medieval philosophy. Sinasabi dito that the Christian scholars were excited by the ideas of Greek philosophers. So they wondered if a Christian scholars could use Aristotle's the logical approach to truth and still keep faith with the Bible. In the middle of 1200s, the scholar Thomas Aquinas argued that the most basic religious truths could be approved by logical argument. So nangyari ito is between between 1267 and 1273. So Aquinas wrote the Summa Theologicae. Aquinas a great work influenced by Aristotle. So combine ancient Greek thought with the Christian's thought of this time. So si Aquinas at ang mga kanyang mga kapwa scholar ay nakilala sa mga dakilang pamantasan is kilala bilang mga mag-aaral o scholastics. To the scholastics use their knowledge debate yung mga issues of their time na ginamit nila. So yung kanilang mga aral tungkol sa batas at pamahalaan ay naka-influence sa pag-iisip ng mga kanlurang Europeo. So yung particular, ang Ingles at Pranses ay alinsunod dito, nagsimula silang bumuo ng mga institusyong demokratiko at tradition. So, ayan. So, that's some of the social changes in Europe, no? And I hope, guys, that may mga naintindihan kayo at naintindihan natin yung changes sa society, no? And, yan. So, dito na ako nagtatapos. Thank you for listening. God bless us all.